Downfall in Berlin, 1944, 1945. By late 1944, Adolf Hitler's world was collapsing around him. The Red Army was advancing relentlessly from the east, having pushed into Poland and the Balkans, while Western Allied forces pressed in from the west, having liberated France and entered Germany's borders. Germany was being squeezed like a vice. Hitler, now mostly holed up in his command bunkers, reacted with bursts of irrational optimism and venomous blame toward those he felt were failing him. He gave fanatical orders for counterattacks and scorched earth measures, refusing to acknowledge the dire reality. On the 16th of December 1944, in one last desperate gamble, Hitler launched the Ardennes Offensive, better known as the Battle of the Bulge. Hoping to split the British and American alliance and force a negotiated peace, German forces struck through the snow-covered forests of Belgium, achieving surprise. For a few weeks, they made some gains, bulging the Allied lines and surrounding some units. Hitler believed this counterstroke might replicate his earlier successes against France. But the offensive soon stalled due to fuel shortages, stubborn Allied defense, and the sheer weight of Allied material superiority. By January 1945, the Ardennes gamble had failed, and the Germans were driven back, having spent the last reserves of their armor and aircraft. From then on, the Western Allies rolled into Western Germany almost unopposed. As 1,945 dawned, the once vaunted German army was a hollow shell of its former self. Most major cities, Hamburg, Cologne, Dresden, and many others, lay in ruins from intense Allied bombing. In these cities, ordinary Germans huddled in cellars as firestorms raged above, emerging to apocalyptic scenes. Food was scarce, communications disrupted. Hitler's regime responded with draconian edicts. Any talk of defeatism was punishable by death, and teenagers and old men were conscripted into a last-ditch militia called the Volkssturm to defend the homeland. Despite the hopelessness, Hitler insisted the war continue. In a radio address on the 30th of January 1945, the 12th anniversary of his coming to power, he exhorted Germans to persevere, declaring that no matter how grave the crisis, their will would master it. It sounded more like a ritual incantation than a realistic plan. In private, Hitler's outlook had darkened to nihilism. On the 19th of March 1945, he issued the so-called Nero Decree, ordering the destruction of all remaining German infrastructure, factories, railways, electric facilities, so nothing would fall intact into enemy hands. He told his armaments minister, Albert Speer, that if the German people could not win, they did not deserve to survive. The stronger Eastern nations would overrun them. Speer would famously disobey these scorched earth instructions, trying to preserve what he could of Germany's future. In April 1945, the final act of Hitler's life unfolded in Berlin. The Soviets had amassed a colossal force and on April 16 began their assault on Berlin, blasting through the last German defenses on the Oder River. Hitler had retreated to Berlin in January, moving into the Führer bunker, a concrete warren beneath the Reich Chancellery garden. At 56, he looked far older, pallid skin, stooped posture, hands shaking. Those in the bunker later described a spectral figure who spent his days shuffling maps and delivering tirades against traitors. Yet, he still clung to illusory hopes of rescue by armies that no longer existed. He pinned his last faith on General Wink's Scratch Force or Steiner's non-existent attack, ordering counterattacks from divisions that had been annihilated. On April 20, his birthday, Hitler ventured up to the Chancellery Garden for the last time. In the ruins above ground, he awarded Iron Crosses to a group of Hitler youth boys who had been fighting on the front lines to defend Berlin. Footage of this final public appearance, a shuffling ashen Hitler patting child soldiers on the cheek, survives as a haunting record of the war's endgame. Observers noted his shock at seeing these children. His eyes were glassy and distant. The next day, April 21, Soviet Marshal Zhukov's forces broke through into the outskirts of Berlin. Artillery shells began landing in the city center. In the bunker, Hitler was informed that no relief force would come. At a tense meeting on April 22, he erupted into a furious outburst. "Everything is lost," he shouted, for the first time acknowledging defeat. He declared he would stay in Berlin and fight or die there. Many staff were dismissed or fled after that. Only his closest loyalists and secretaries remained by his side. As Soviet noose tightened around central Berlin, Hitler's thoughts turned to final acts. On April 28, he learned of two more betrayals. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, had secretly tried to negotiate surrender with the Western Allies, and Hermann Goering, his designated successor, had sent a message suggesting he take over leadership since Hitler was cut off in Berlin. Enraged, Hitler ordered Himmler's representative in the bunker Fegelein, who was also Eva Braun's brother-in-law, executed for treason, and he expelled Goering from all his positions. The sense of betrayal and isolation weighed heavily on him. Yet one personal desire he fulfilled at the very end. Around midnight on April 28-29, in the depths of the bunker, Adolf Hitler married Eva Braun, his longtime companion who had joined him in Berlin against his wishes earlier in April. It was a brief civil ceremony in a cramped map room. Afterwards, the newlyweds shared a simple wedding breakfast with a few aides. Those present noted an eerie calm in Hitler following the marriage, as if he had finally resolved himself to his fate. He dictated his last will and political testament, a rambling document blaming the Jews for the war and urging continued resistance. On the 30th of April 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks away, Adolf Hitler bid farewell to his staff in the bunker. Around 3:30 inches the afternoon, he retired to his private room with Eva Braun. There, Hitler shot himself with his pistol while Eva took poison, cyanide. Aides entered to find them lifeless on a sofa, Hitler's body slumped with a bullet wound to his temple, Eva Braun's corpse beside him, elegant in her final moments. According to Hitler's instructions, bunker staff carried the bodies up to the Chancellery garden above, placed them in a shell crater amid the burning ruins of Berlin, doused them in gasoline, and set them on fire. As Soviet shells exploded nearby, the two corpses crackled and burned into charred remnants. The man who once ruled an empire stretching across Europe was reduced to ashes blown by the wind. Within days, Berlin fell. On May 2, Soviet commanders accepted the city's surrender. A week later, on the 8th of May 1945, Germany capitulated unconditionally. World War II in Europe was over. Hitler's promised thousand-year Reich had lasted a mere 12 years and 4 months, and in that time it had wrought destruction on an almost unimaginable scale. The war Hitler unleashed took tens of millions of lives. His regime perpetrated the Holocaust, the systematic murder of approximately 6 million Jews and millions of others deemed undesirable: Roma, Slavs, POWs, disabled persons, in what remains one of history's most heinous crimes. When the guns fell silent, much of Europe lay in ruins, a testament to the terrible cost of Hitler's ambitions. In the quiet aftermath, as survivors wandered through devastated cities and soldiers returned home, the world was left to reckon with Hitler's legacy. In Germany, there was profound silence and bewilderment. A nation that had followed Hitler into war now faced occupation, division, and moral ruin. At Nuremberg, his top lieutenants were put on trial for war crimes, with the court declaring the Nazi regime a paradigm of modern evil. Hitler himself was beyond earthly judgment. Soviet search teams in Berlin eventually found fragments of his dental remains, confirming his death, but no grave or monument marks his resting place. His ashes were secretly scattered to prevent any shrine. Adolf Hitler's life, from the small-town boy in Austria to the dictator in the bunker, stands as a cautionary tale of how prejudice, unchecked power, and totalitarian fervor can shape history's course in the most devastating ways. In the soft, reflective light of hindsight, one contemplates the ripples of his actions through time. Each decision, from rearming Germany to invading Poland to implementing genocide, sent shockwaves that are still felt generations later. In the silence that followed the end of the war, the world slowly began to heal and rebuild, but it would never be the same. Hitler left behind a world scarred by war and genocide, a Europe divided by the Iron Curtain of the Cold War, and a collective resolve that such horrors must never be allowed to happen again. The Führer, who once mesmerized millions, ended his days a broken man in a bunker, railing against imagined betrayals as his empire crumbled above him. His story remains as a solemn warning, a reminder of how a lone individual's hatred and ambition, if empowered and unchecked, can ripple through time, destroying countless lives and reshaping the world. In the calm after the storm, as the world looked upon the ruins and the liberated concentration camps with stunned sorrow, there was a determination that echoed like a prayer. Never again.